working on this water treatment plant. The water treatment plant has been on our radar since practically the day we started. This is for the benefit of all the new people, just context, history, okay? We were here through the Carollo report. Actually, we were here right at the end of the Reese report, and we were here through the Carollo report. We were here through a number of interim things that happened. We are well versed in the contracts that we're doing about the quality of the wells. We have been doing this for quite some time. And I just wanted to say that this is sort of like the culmination of all of that work, because somebody is going to be making a decision on Tuesday night. And it's gonna be like the culmination of all of that work. So what I tried to do was I tried to go back, and you have this on this piece of paper, this one here. I tried to go back and I found in the records the communication to the city commission that we sent them on November 4, 2019, okay? This is when the mayor had come to us and had asked us, generally, is a P3 an appropriate vehicle to do this water treatment plant? And at that time, P3 had a very broad meaning. It wasn't this particular P3. This particular P3 was not on the radar at the time, but it was a conceptual question. And P3 at that time meant the whole spectrum of P3s. You know, you can do a P3 with a design build. You could do it design, build, maintain. You can do it with design, build, own. There's a whole spectrum of P3s, and we had wonderful meetings about that. Okay? So eventually, though, we did come to the conclusion that generically, as a concept, a P3 was an acceptable idea to do a water treatment plant. And let me just read the communication directly so that we're very clear on what we said to the commission. The committee is broadly in favor of considering a public-private partnership, provided that the city does not give up control of the water supply, the rate structure, or the water quality. Should the city choose to enter into a P3, it should first engage a consultant to evaluate the different options and provide an opinion on the best possible P3 approach for the city's specific circumstances. So it wasn't this P3, it was design build management, it was like the whole spectrum. And we encouraged them to get a consultant, which they did, which was Hazen and Sawyer when they came on board relatively quickly after this, to advise you on the best possible P3 approach for the city's specific circumstances. Okay, and we also agreed that it would be the best for the city to begin preparations to seek that appropriate consultant to determine the best P3 option should they decide to proceed with that process. And I remember when I made this testimony at the commission, I had a watch on at the time, and after I made it, I said, the clock is ticking, guys. Let's get going, because there was always a sense of urgency that we had to come to a conclusion in this.
Looks like you lost that.
I don't wear a watch anymore. I have an iPhone. I don't wear a watch. What can I say? So anyway, so this is going back to 2019 to bring everybody up to what we said to the commission, which was sort of the basis of our discussion about P3s. Time goes by, Hazen and Sawyer comes on board, P3 unsolicited proposals get put on the table, more unsolicited proposals. Hazen and Sawyer is told to wait, not by us. The commission tells them to wait while we explore the P3 procedures and processes. That took up a good deal of time. That took up 2 years of time. And they finally got to the point where the commission decided that they were gonna go P3. And they were gonna go with this group. This particular group, after vetting 4 different groups, they decided that this group had the best proposal, they liked this group the best. That was February of last year, 2022. At which time we all huddled and we talked, and they actually asked us to huddle and talk about, should we go this route with this group? And we said no. We said we believe we should do an RFP. And it wasn't unanimous. You didn't agree with that at the time, but the rest of us did. And we took that to the commission, and they said, thank you very much, you're our advisory board, but we are gonna go this route. So at that point, our job didn't changed, it shifted, because now the makers had made a decision. We were not going back to RFPs anymore, we were not gonna kick that horse anymore. They made the decision. So our job in the intervening year, from February to today, was to engage the staff, to talk with them, to get information about the comprehensive agreement, which was not at all fleshed out in February of last year. But over time is now the third, the fourth, the fifth version. We have the fifth version of the PowerPoint presentation, which describes it, more comprehensively with more information. And now we've had these 2 workshops with the commission. Again, on this fleshed out document, this fleshed out comprehensive agreement with its 26 appendices. And we've had a lot of more questions than we had before, but I think you and tell me if you don't agree with me, that I think most of the questions were answered at the last meeting we had. We had 20 questions. Unless we have any more questions, are we putting any more questions on the table? Does anybody have more questions now?
I have a couple of small things, but they're not really, don't really affect the outcome of our discussion.
Not material? Okay. All right, so what we need to discuss today as a group is, they're gonna vote tomorrow. What are we gonna say? We have told them this was not our preferred option, but if you're gonna go that way, we've already told them, don't lose control of the water, don't lose control of the quality, and don't lose control of the rates. And I think we could all pretty much understand from the information we've been given, all check. We keep control of the water, we keep control of the quality, and it's a fixed price contract, so we have a predictable understanding of what the rates will be, and we've got control of the rates. So, open question, let's just talk. James, you were first.
So Marilyn, when the first, you were just talking about this first meeting where the group talked about would a P3 be something the group would be okay with, like paraphrasing here. That was in when was that,
2019, end of 2019.
Okay, so.
Well, actually.
It was before I joined.
Yeah, but let me correct myself. The communication to the commission was at the end of November. We started that discussion in the summer of 2019. It took us a long time to get to that conclusion.
Yeah. So I missed all that, so I wasn't part of the group.
That's right.
I'm wondering if the outcome of that and the decision had any kind of influence on the city commission in terms of, well, we're just gonna go with the P3 instead of even considering in parallel track to find out more about the RFP process. We learned last week that there was fees or a cost associated. They wanted to continue with the RFP, and I think the number was 2 million that Alan said. Some kind of, if they had continued with that, there would have been that cost. So it sounds like they made a decision based on money. I don't know for sure. It seems to me like that was not a prudent decision, and that the whole, if you're gonna spend $500-700 million, and 2 million's nothing, and that a disservice was done to the city, however that decision was made, to go with a P3 and not to do an RFP.
Well,
We can't go back and change
No, I understand that, but the way it was described to us was that when Hazen and Sawyer was chosen as the representative, as our city representative, okay? There were 3 parts to their contract. Correct me anytime you wanna jump in. One was just to provide technical assistance, and one, which was the smaller part, the smaller part of the contract. The larger part of the contract was to move into an RFP. You're right. Provide those types of services to go into an RFP. Hazen and Sawyer was stopped. And that, I don't know who made that decision to stop them, but they were stopped. And I think you could reasonably assume that That's probably dangerous to assume, but in my opinion, the reason they were stopped was that there was this romance with P3s at the time. It was like everything was gonna be at P3, yeah, it was gonna solve all the problems. We had just come off a very successful Lockhart Stadium, and everybody said, see, it works, it's wonderful, we didn't pay a penny and we got this wonderful thing. So there was a sort of a sentiment at that time, around 2019, 2000, that, this was gonna be the way we were gonna do business. And the decision was made to hold off, and then what happened was, they held off just long enough for the first P3 to drop on the table. Once the first one dropped on the table, well, now we're into P3. Okay, now we gotta evaluate the P3, we gotta have competition.
Right.
That took up, 18 months.
Right.
Okay, so that's history.
Right.
Let me-
So, and we can't go back, we can't redo it, it's water under the bridge.
And through the treatment plant, so to
Right,
speak.
water through the treatment plant. So here we are.
Yep.
And the urgency seems even more intense than ever, even though we've, in my opinion, lost a lot of time by doing P3 evaluation rather than, at a minimum, done a parallel RFP. Let me finish, Jerry. And then, here we are. And now I feel like there's a lot of pressure right now to push for a resolution or an agreement or something that coming out of this group that says, yep, let's go forward with all this. Just, that's what I'm saying.
That's
I
why
know
we're
Peter's
having
next.
this meeting to have everybody,
Okay.
so who's next? Now, wait a minute.
Peter,
Are you-
Peter,
Jerry-
I wanna add something
Jerry's
about
got
that.
a,
There was one other, a lot of the conversation took place before you were here. Everything you said is absolutely positively true. Total agreement with what you said. But there was one additional factoid that has to do not with the money, but the time and thoroughness to prepare the specifications for an RFP for something of this magnitude. Superimposed on that was the fret, I remember looking at you because the fret that you had over the fact that through the COVID period, the staff of this city was kind of depleted. You remember the conversations we had about who you got to do the work? Remember? So, were they in a position to be able to staff a unit to be able to prepare the RFP was also a consideration.
okay.
Let's put that on the table.
The only thing I'd like to say too, based on Jim's thing, and he's correct, is the fact that when we got involved, we were trying to encourage the commission to consider going for the RFP because the P3s could also participate in that where we may have more bids,
Right.
maybe more competitive bids in which to do this.
Yeah, as I said, P3 in our brains at the time was included an RFP that you would
Sure.
give a P3 company the contract to do. So our definition of P3 at the time was very broad.
And the other thing is, I wanted to add is that 2 out of the 5 commissioners for District 1 and District 3 voted against having the P3. Remember, we had the mayor, District 2 and 4 for the P3. So it wasn't a unanimous decision rendered.
Right,
And so that,
good to point that out. So wait a minute, next is Peter.
Well, do you have something directly related to what Jim says?
Yeah.
I want to kind of rule it out.
Yeah. I just want to comment that you was talking about the $2 million. And it was that the main reason, it not necessarily because there was also a 2-year time frame that was also put on the table. And it was that additional time it took to go with the RFP with the expected increase in labor and increase in parts what the $2 million cost that would be tagged on to what we wanted to do with the RFP. But you're correct. Consider the amount of money we were spending. The $2 million didn't mean a whole lot but the time did.
So Peter, you wanted to broaden the discussion out?
Well, see, I'd kind of like to know, I think I know where Jim stands now, but where everybody stands. So I'll tell you broadly where I stand and my thought process. So, taking it back as far as the exact method of treatment and the decision, 5-ash or not, I am largely convinced by the arguments that we've heard and all the detail that we've been given. I wanted to pick up on your point, Chair, from last time about our staff, and specifically to highlight two people that we've heard from. And one is Pat Davis from
Hazen Sawyer, yeah.
who is, believe me, he's almost nationally known. He does work all over the world. I know this for a fact. And he lives here. So he's standing there making recommendations that he personally is going to have to live with because he lives in the city. So when he turns on his tap, he is going to be drinking this water. The same person that stands there and gives us advice. Further, the consultants are paid, but I can tell you, because I've taken one of his courses, he teaches a course for engineers in ethics. So if he gave what I subsequently regard to be bad advice, I would have no hesitation reporting him to the board, because he is someone who holds himself out to be an ethical expert on matters affecting engineering. So I find him to be very trustworthy and believable. And the same thing applies to Dr. Becker, who is nationally known. He's a doctor, he has a PhD. So I find their arguments very convincing. Now, turning to the issue of how we procure this particular plant, I actually don't think that there's a wrong decision or recommendation. I believe there's to use the jargon, a non-negligible chance that the city could save money by doing an RFP. But it will take a lot longer, and it does introduce a level of risk. And I believe in the maxim of KISS, keep it simple, stupid. Water plant is hardly a simple thing in the first place. And by doing an RFP, we introduce another level of complexity and risk to the city. And I largely got onto this board because I never want to see another day or several weeks like we had, whenever it was, Christmas of 2018, 19, I forget, when our trunk sewer exploded on more than one occasion. I mean, literally, there was sewage running down the streets and into people's houses. And we became emblematic of this and almost a laughing stock. And I never want to see that happen again. So I err on the side of speed and expediency, and I'm tending to still favor the P3 approach. Having said that, there are some things in the P3 agreement that disquiet me. I would have certainly preferred to have seen the P3 proposal put in more than 25% of capital funding. It concerns me a lot whether they have enough skin in the game. But it does equate at the end to well over 100 million. So I can be persuaded that that's just about acceptable. I'm having even more trouble with the clause that they have in there that says on the second anniversary, the main owner can sell out their interest to a third party. I'm just having a lot of trouble finding that to be acceptable. Those qualifications, I'm leaning P3, but I don't think that the RFP would be wrong either. I trust the staff to do it. There's just things introduced there that I don't think we should get involved with.
Thank you, Peter. And just to sort of clarify something before we move on, the staff has explained to us that there are two things in terms of the people moving on. One is the operator, okay? And the operator can move on after 1 or 2 years, second year, but only with the city's permission. There is no qualification. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, that's wrong, I believe.
No, there's two partners. One is the operator, one is the equity partner. It's the equity partner that can move on if they can find another equity partner capitalized at $100 million, and the city cannot reasonably refuse to let them move on. That's the equity partner.
Yeah, I agree.
But the operator, he could also request to move on, but it's only with the city's acceptance of the next operator, and there's no qualifications. So that when they explain, am I getting that right?
Yeah, basically it's right. I mean, the qualifications would have to be vetted by us.
And there's no language there that says you can't unreasonably withhold your
Absolute
consent.
discretion.
Right, it's an absolute discretion thing. Okay,
But the
so,
main proponent,
Yeah.
who's basically going to pull the strings on this process, is able to go after 2 years
Yes.
if they find the right financial buyer.
right, that is true, and I too am concerned about that. We brought it up at the hearing.
Yeah.
And Pamela Beasley said, well, I want more information about that. That doesn't sound like a good idea to me either. So whether or not she's been persuaded otherwise or not, yes, let's keep that right up front. All right, so look, Ralph, let's go this way. We skipped Jerry, we'll come back to Jerry. You,
Well, as you know, I was definitely opposed to the P3 for water treatment plants. And the reason I was is because I did a little investigation throughout our country and world actually, but more so in the United States. And I found some examples where that there were treatment plants that went with the P3 and they had all sorts of problems, and for one reason or another. I mean, you have to be there and to understand what were the problems, what was the understanding, and how rigid or unrigid was the contract. But there was the San Diego desalination plant that was one of those. Gosh, I don't have those dates in mind.
Close.
that's 10 years ago, San Diego.
I would say over 10, yeah, I would be on the thing. Then there was a Tampa desalination plant, so I think of more recent times. I don't know if it's 2015 or something like that, that rings in my mind, but I could be wrong. And there was other treatment plants around the country that also had some hiccups with that. And I got them really on the internet, you know, and Googling around and trying to find what was what. I spoke to engineers locally here, and they indicated even like South Miami was interested in P3, and then they went down, the consulting firm went down there and analyzed everything and told them that they would recommend not to go with the P3. That was CDM Smith, I guess, was that consultant. Not that I want to mention anybody's names, but, and that was the one in 2015. So, the Tampa one, I had everything listed here, but not in this package here, but. Anyway, that being said, I gave that information to the District 1 Commissioner, Heather Moratis at the time, because she asked me, she says, well, Ralph, what's some of the history around? And I said, yeah, just pulled them up off the internet, and I have this information for you, and I guess she shared, I don't know if, she shared that with the rest, but just wanted to give them information that this P3 was not without some bad history with it. So then, to continue onward, I found that in some of the details that there was what I had stated before, over a year or two back, was the fact that the operation was going to be controlled by the private entity. The quality and equipment and the treatment processes were going to be controlled, really to maximize profits for the investors involved in those projects. So that's scary. So it looks like our commission, what they told us, that they're funding 75% of the project, with 25% for the private individuals or investors. Normally, I found in the other parts of the country that it was the reverse. It was the private sector was 75% funding or more, and the public was 25 or less. So there's a lot of things. I mean, it's like you have a bad experience with a car, and you say, oh, that car is no good, that's a Ford, and that won't be, I'm just arbitrarily saying this, and I'm not gonna get any more Fords, and it comes out that was just happened to be a Lemon or something, whatever. Other Fords are fine. I drive a Ford, and I'm happy, I maintain it, and it works good. The same analogy can be applied to a treatment plant. The mayor has unequivocally said a number of times that the 5-ash water treatment plant is just being held with chewing gum and shoestring or whatever it was. I visited that many years back, 4 years back, and then Tuesday of last week I went there. And I tell you, I have to take my hat off to the operators and the personnel at that plant. That's a marvelous, well-kept plant. You go down and you look at the high service pumps, the generator that's there, it's maintained. They even explained to me how they get the bearings in there. It's easier for the older ones than it is for the newer pumps and stuff. And when you go there, you'll say, people say, oh, water flood's gonna flood it out and everything. You go there, you gotta walk up steps. That elevation's up higher when, so I'm impressed with the condition of that, and I don't know who of you have gone to the 5-ash, the tour walkthrough. Got one there.
And when I was there, every pump was leaking. Every pump. When I was there with my own eyes, every pump was leaking. Just saying, saying.
Well, and
So where does this leave you, Ralph?
Huh?
Where does this leave you vis-a-vis the situation we're at right now, the point we are at right now?
Point that right now, I would say, with all things considered, I would vote against the P3.
Roosevelt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm gonna learn as everybody around the table speak. Let me be up front right now, because of the things that was stated by Peter and by the mayor and what we saw with sewer. I don't wanna take the chance on those extra 2 years that they're talking about. And we criticize the city for not being diligent and setting aside, money to maintain the sewer. I don't think if we went with the RFP, they are not gonna set aside, money to take care of emergencies should something happen. And we was told that if something happened to Five Ash, we're done. Because there is not enough pumps and wells other places to make up for what Five Ash provides. And so because of that, I'm gonna go with P3, but I just wanna say to Peter, when you said 5%, 25% is not enough skin in the game, and I agree with you, but it's already been agreed to by the city and the contractor, am I correct? So that's a dead issue. And when you talk about the hiccups with the P3s from other places that have P3 water plant situations, those hiccups, were they because of labor or were they because of parts? And would they have the same hiccups if the same companies would have did it on the RFP?
It was because of the attorneys. They had a whole host of attorneys, and the verbiage in there with maybe just like our city attorney,
Okay.
he got overwhelmed.
Okay.
Okay. So fortunately for us, we hired outside counsel who specializes in water treatment plants, but they agreed that the language on the escape clauses was, business as usual. It doesn't make it right, it just makes it, well, that's business as usual. So,
I'm
you good?
going to, anything else I will have at the end.
Okay. Shane?
So, after last week and hearing everything from Boyd and the other gentleman, that was the first time that I heard the pilot study called into question. So that caused me to take a step back and think about it a little bit. I know they mentioned that the Reese report and the Carollo and then the Reese pilot study all kind of came up with the same conclusion. Granted, the initial Reese report gave that as option 3 or option C, right? The replacement of the plant. My question is, okay, I don't necessarily know the qualifications of Mr. Corbin or the other gentlemen who are calling that into question, the validity of the pilot study, but city staff confirmed that there was no concern, right? So I tend to have to lean towards city staff and, like we discussed last week, the consultants that we have hired, and especially, as Peter pointed out, the ethics of the engineers. And they're telling us that study was not flawed and there is no concern. I don't know, it'd be interesting to know what the cost and how long it would be for another pilot study. And if that throws us completely out of the schedule, completely out of whack, which I assume it does. So I have to tend to lean towards city staff and our consultants. But that was my only hesitation for the P3. I think as far as P3 versus RFP, there's too many risks that can be introduced by going the RFP route at this point, and the timing, and I have to go P3. My vote would be P3.
Very good.
All right, Michael, I don't, it's very hard for
Hello
you,
there.
it's like, let's just throw him in the pot of water and see what happens.
Throw him to the sharks.
Plead the fifth.
Like most things I feel like that have happened in life, I'm used to being thrown into the fire, so this is a next level type of fire that's burning hotter than I've ever felt before.
Yeah.
But So I had the opportunity to tour the plant. I think I too was relatively really impressed with the upkeep and the condition of the plant for its age. However, you know, I'm not a construction expert, I'm not an infrastructure expert as it relates to, you know, looking at walls and looking at different, different elements of a building to determine its structural integrity. But there were a number of different areas that I saw, you know, I saw beams that were cracked, you know, and they basically just, you know, yeah, well, we just fix things as we go. And, you know, I think you just get to a point with a building that, you know, that building being built, in the 50s, eventually it's time to move on. I mean, you know, at what point are we gonna look at this building and go, okay, well, now we can label it, you know, now we can label it a historical structure, you know what I mean? Like, so it was an interesting comment as well. The you know, what spooked me a little last meeting was the resiliency aspect to it, right? I mean, it seems very apparent that we don't really have a plan for resiliency that I seem to be comfortable with. As it relates to a flood, I'm not worried when it comes to, you know, hurricanes as far as wind is concerned. It always seems to be water, and so it was a good point that was mentioned that you have to walk up the steps to get to this thing. Now, I have no idea what flood elevations look like in that area. I have no idea what, you know, a potential catastrophic storm could do and could bring in terms of, you know, amount of water. But that was a big concern of mine. You know, touring part of the plant, looking at the old equipment, you know, familiar with engines a little bit, and you know, those Caterpillar diesel motors that they had are from the 40s and 50s, they said, which is incredible that they've kept them running that long. But again, you know, there's going to be a time at some point in the future to move on. My biggest discomfort with this is, again, the RFP P3 type situation. And I guess, you know, and if we can't turn back the clock, I think if we could turn back the clock 2 years or 3 years and say, look, we could pull the trigger, I think shaving off for 200 million or more off of the cost of this would be a lot less, you know, less painful, right? It would be, I think this has become this even more incrementally difficult of a decision because now this thing's ballooned in price to $666 million. So the risk I think here is that if we kick the can down the road another couple of years, go through the RFP process. I mean, look, I'm in the financial business for a living. Nobody here at this table, no institutional professionals. I mean, unless somebody's got a crystal ball here, nobody really knows what's going to happen with inflation in the next year, 2 years, 3 years. If we continue to run that risk, I mean, nobody knows. We could settle back into 2.5%, or we could balloon back out to 15-20% again. It's happened before. So I'd hate to get to a point where, you know, God forbid, in 2 years that, you know, something irregular happens and, you know, we're looking at 800 million or, you know, $1 billion alone. And so, you know, it's the work that this committee has done over the last 5-6 years on this is, I mean, you know, it's hard coming into this part of the process at this time. I did some, you know, obviously some studying through, you know, when I ran for office last year. This was a big topic back then. And, you know, I tend to side also with the consultants that we have. The city spent a lot of money. These are qualified consultants. They're well respected. I think that's an important, you know, piece to mention and to really respect. At the end of the day, I mean, what are we paying these consultants for if we can't trust them? And I'm really torn. I really am, you know, and I think that if I was to favor one or the other, I'm going to favor the P3 by a razor hair margin, simply because of the opportunity cost of time and potential expense.
So Roosevelt, do you have a comment on his?
I just got a question.
Sure.
You talked about the structure, the building, not being too sound. What about the interior, the pumps and all that stuff? If they was good, would you still go for a P3?
I probably wouldn't. No, because again, I look at if the shell of the building that's protecting the inside, right? If I feel like there's, again, really at the end of the day, for me, it's the age. If there's any shadow of a doubt to question the age and the structural integrity of that building, being how old it is, if you don't have the outside of the building to protect what's inside, then what good is the inside? So, I mean, I talked to during the tour, I talked to the staff that runs the place. I've never met, I think, a group of people that collectively take more pride in what they do and, love what they do and love that plant. I mean, that plant is their baby. And it was really just an interesting tour from that perspective because these people really, really care about their jobs. And another piece of it was, I think that there likely is concern with this change with the staff that also runs the plant, going from, pure city to, operated by a private entity. I think that would bring concern to anybody that's used to working, in a structure that's been the way it's been for decades as far as the water plant's concerned. So, but yeah, no, the folks at the plant seem to communicate that they would be perfectly fine and able and willing to continue the maintenance and the upkeep and the upgrades and so on. I know that the city has spent, a good bit of money on making some upgrades that they said were, good for 5 years or whatever. So I think that with the plant the way it is right now, we feel comfortable, or they felt comfortable, that they would be able to operate the way they are for the next 5 years, which gives us time to, to build a new plant, right? But yeah, no, I mean, that's a great question. Yeah, at some point, that stuff's gonna have to be replaced. It's, you know what I mean?
Michael?
Well, I share a lot of, what's been stated here today. I agree with Peter. I think that RFP, I don't think it would have been a wrong decision, 2 years ago, RFP or P3. But I understand the risk mitigation with P3. I get why that, it could be a more prudent decision. I'm not so sure though, if going with the P3 now, I can't say I'm entirely comfortable or feel like I'm entirely got my head around my comfort level with the terms of the P3 agreement and whether it's the actual best deal for the city. For reasons that Peter brought out, reasons that Russell brought out. And again, it's stuff that, that Shane mentioned with last week, I know that eventually, you got to upgrade, and upgrading, sometimes it just makes more sense to just rebuild. I get it, but I don't know, looking at it from a broader perspective. I mean, there was mention about the distribution system, and most people say your system's only as good as its weakest link, and so I don't know how well we understand what that's going to what that is involved with that, and whether or not we can, that's something that what extent it needs to be tackled and how we can tackle it and when we can tackle it, and whether or not we're going to be able to really reap the benefits of this new plant. So as far as P3 RFP, I get the P3, it's okay, I'm okay with it. I just still have some lingering uncertainties about whether or not, at the end of the day, we're going to get exactly the result that we want.
Very good question, and that came up several times. And I had asked Alan, sent him an email, and maybe when he comes back, he'll have the information. To give us information about how much money in the last 5 years have we invested in replacing the pipes in the distribution system? And how much money is in the next 5-year CIP to replace the pipe? And give me an estimate of how much it would cost to replace the whole thing and how long it would take us to do that. Because that, agreed, is when we will reap the optimum benefit. So perhaps we'll get that information, but I do recall, and I know from my own personal experience, that they have been replacing the water pipes in front of my building, and Rio Vista is completely repiped. So it's definitely part of what we're doing. And maybe you know the answer, Chris.
I can give you the answer on the distribution system. Yeah, in the last 5 years, we spent roughly about $34.5 million over the last 5 years. And we have currently programs in our requested CIP from 23 to 27, roughly $54 million for additional distribution projects on water.
That's a significant amount of money, isn't it?
It is. Now, would that's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 88 million or so?
88.
will we be completely replace the distribution system, or we still got a whole lot to go?
No, I mean, if you, yeah, no, these are just neighborhood size projects, anywhere from small end, 500,000 upwards to $7 million projects. But you're talking roughly, I don't have it in front of me right now, maybe 15 projects, and if you consider how many neighborhoods we have, 15 is not anywhere near the city. So you're looking in the percentage, if I were to throw out a rough number, probably in the 10 to 20% range.
So we looking at this 640 whatever million plus another 500 million.
Yeah, but recognize the fact that a large majority of our water pipes are not 50 or 60 years old anymore. So what we're covering is the high-risk areas, the oldest pipes in the city, areas of known breaks and so forth. Meanwhile, the rest of the city that we're not going to be touching in the next 5 years are the areas that have not been so problematic. So you don't have to do the entire city all at once just to say we're good for the next 50.
And I agree with you, but eventually we have to replace, or we'll be in the same situation that we're in right now with pipes breaking. It's when we get the money, I think we should replace things as we go.
Before we
And
get to Peter,
that's unusual for me to talk about spending money.
can I ask you some,
I'm flabbergasted.
can I ask you some information on that? We, as part of the consent order, the second consent order with the state, which involved the water distribution, not the sewers, we had to hire a consultant to do for us on water what Hazen and Sawyer had done for us on sewers. And there was a lot of back and forth and grief and aggravation, and eventually we finally and now have that consultant on board, correct?
For the consent order?
For the consent?
Yes, actually, we're in the last remaining 3 years of that program, so we're actually winding down.
Right, so he or she, whoever is the consultant, you may not know who is the consultant for that piece of the work.
Mhm.
They have started that work.
Yes,
And they are putting together the overall plan for the pipes. And what we've been doing, if I understand it correctly, is we've been hitting the major high at-risk pieces of it. But relatively shortly, we should have a comprehensive view of the total picture of what we need to do. Isn't that what he is supposed to be doing?
not exactly. So there are some projects in our asset management. It's AMCMON for
Right.
the letters. I can never remember the CMON. But the asset management portion that they're developing a plan for us, which requires numerous different types of reports, policies, procedures, and so forth, standard details. They are doing some risk assessment. They're not going to be creating some sort of a master plan, which is really kind of the path that you're going down, where you have a master planned prioritization of your entire city's network.
Well, maybe
So-
we should be talking about that as part of our mission.
It very well could be one of the projects that come out of this. That's a recommended piece of the puzzle that we implement. The water consent order, generally speaking, was really focused on, well, it was kicked off mainly because of the large supply line that was drilled through and the difficulty of finding valves to shut mains down during major events like that. So obviously the valve exercising program, which we actually have valve exercising crews now, as well as supplemental contracts.
And it's DER required.
It's also required for permitting purposes to be an operator like we are. So programs like that were born out of this. Some of the water main projects that we executed in that 34 million that I mentioned were partially born out of the consent order. But the water consent order, generally speaking, was more of a processes and procedures and an asset management kind of development, if you will, came out of that more than anything.
Okay, so we could in fact, as we go forward, start talking about in order, if they go for this and we've got 5 years, maybe what we should be talking about is accelerating some of that work. Maybe making some changes in priorities so that more of the pipes will be, more of the problematic pipes will be replaced by the time this new plant comes online, so we can maximize the benefit.
Well,
But
certainly.
that's a,
And as you probably noticed, I mean, we're spending 20 more over the next 5 years, which of course that equates to what, 4 million a year, but still, we're spending 20 million more in the next 5 than we did the previous 5.
so it's accelerating,
To
we're accelerating the
somewhat.
spending,
Mhm.
which
And,
is a good thing.
that means we're taking a little bit away from sewer, because again, our focus was sewer at the time. So we're starting to balance back out
Nice.
towards increasing what we spend on water. And trust me, the master planning based on risk assessment and so benefit cost is definitely something that we have to do and we do in a cycle. So with the Reese report, which is in my opinion several years, I wouldn't call it outdated, but that gave us data years ago as to our risk factors for various water and sewer lines in the city. We need to add on to that, and that's something that we do, maybe not from a citywide perspective, but we're constantly updating the information in that.
Okay, Ralph, you had a question for
Well,
me?
yes, and my concern is when you're bringing up the sewers, when this infrastructure task force, the inception of it, I got in here and I think Marilyn was ready to, wish I had never, gonna hit me over the head. But I kept saying that you have to go in and replace those old vitrified clay gravity mains because they're failing, they're submerged, they're allowing not only the groundwater in, they're allowing the sand in. And, that's still happening. And even though the consent orders were issued by the regulatory agency and they jumped on the force mains and such, that's still happening. And there's hundreds of millions of dollars that's been spent on those new force mains from going to the Lomar plant. And they're still getting ground down. Their life expectancy is coming down unless you get those basins, identify those basins that have a lot of the sand is really the villain in this story.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen again.
So we do have an I&I inflow and infiltration program where I call it in its infancy, even though it's been something we've been doing for the last 10 years, where we're spending, again, more money than we used to, and where we've prioritized basins based, what we're using right now, because we don't have flow meters in all of our pump stations, is pump run times. So
We had that
But that-
presentation,
but
that
that
was a
can
very
be-
interesting presentation.
That can be deceiving because it could be longer run times because the impeller blades have ground down.
Yeah.
And it's running longer to get that and it's lost its performance.
So
As you know.
as part of, when we go into these basins, we do assess things such as the pump condition and then ultimately, TVing the lines where we know there are issues just to verify whether they need to be replaced versus lining and so forth. The whole process is there that we do this, but the initial prioritization, you have to start somewhere. So between pump run times as well as saline content, when we do measurements at some of our stations to see how much salt water is getting in, that's indicative usually of groundwater infiltration. So there's some other things that we do, and we also obviously track anytime we replace pumps. So we're well aware if a pump station has newer or refurbished pumps in it and it's still running 15 plus hours a day, there's a problem. It's either too much flow or it's I&I. And we can monitor that based on rainstorms and how we get peaks and valleys in our run times versus rainstorm events. So that's those are the three ways that we find
And
out.
the headworks at the Lomar plant
Yeah.
showing the sand buildup. They had piles of sand when I was there a few years back.
Yeah, so the content of the solids, suspended solids in the water at the plant, as well as again, salt, and then also just simply flow.
Okay, can we keep going?
Yes.
Yeah, you're next,
I'm next.
you're next. What, you have
Did
a
Peter have a
question
question?
relative to that?
So just, Chris, again, the 34.5 million was what again?
So that's the approximate amount that we've spent in the last 5 years on our water distribution lines replacement projects.
Including the water.
That does not include the plants. I did not come prepared for the plant question.
Okay,
Okay, so when I first joined this group, one of the first big votes was whether or not we thought that the city commission should go with an RFP or we should go with the P3. And I was not comfortable at that time with the concept of P3 having anything to do with the water, which I consider as a basic function utility of the city. And there was too many unknowns. Also, we didn't know who was gonna control the rates, who the employees were gonna work for, a lot of questions. So it made sense to me, it got reaction, no, this is not the route to go. We voted 6-1. We brought it forward to the city commission. City commission in a 3-2 vote said, we're going with the P3. Ernst & Young had come in, had done their work trying to compare the apples to oranges to the peaches to the pears, because they were 4 unsolicited reports. And they weren't alike at all, or very, and maybe in some places, but not entirely. So I think what they brought forward, they had their little chart, the greens, acceptable meats, all that, very typical consultant type stuff. And a decision was made, and I think the city commission, not that I like that they were doing a P3, but I think they selected, based on what the information they had at the time, the correct group, the RDB team. Then, and as Marilyn has said earlier, they're in love with P3s. They did Lockhart, they did One Stop, they've done this. This is this group. Now maybe with the changeover, things will be different, I don't know. But we'll wait to see when One Stop comes up again, which I think it might. In any event, so then we went into the comprehensive agreement, and that hashed out, and that went for months. Finally, we got through that, and here we are. The city isn't gonna go, water through the treatment plant, the city isn't gonna go back and do an RFP. That is not going to happen, even though I think initially they should have, and when I learned, when Commissioner Herbst brought that up at the meeting a couple weeks ago, that there had been one time a plan to do a parallel path. I thought, holy shit, this is where they have really done a disservice to the community by not continuing with that. It's water through the treatment plant, just the same. We are not going back. They're not going to do an RFP. They're going to go forward with this. I haven't toured the water treatment plant, but I've heard enough. It needs to go. We need to move on. We need to build something new. I'm reluctantly come to the conclusion that we need to go out to the new place, Prospect. I wish there had been space around 5 Ash. I wish there had been some kind of really concerted effort by the city to buy more property around there. I know you can't, tear down I-95, but go west. I don't know, it just seemed to me that would have been a better approach. It's not what they've done. They've gone forward with the Prospect area. The idea of not having enough skin in the game, I agree. I don't think the 25% is enough. You talk to Susan about it, she'll say, well, the city got better rates. They can get capital cheaper than what the private company can, which is true, which saves us money in a way, because otherwise the private company would have jacked up the AP more. Not that they're not, I'm sure, have a wonderful profit margin on this. I am sure. That's business, right? I'm not real happy with IDE. I said before that when you look at the Ernst & Young report, to not list a margin of error or a contingency in some way, they guaranteed $385 million. Every other company that bid on this or offered an unsolicited proposal, they had that built in. They added some kind of margin of error, but this group didn't. So pretty confident, and now, they turn around and have to raise the price, which was really basically a 25% increase, or was a 25% margin of error.
Do you have a question?
I'm not done talking,
I'm not
let me
done.
finish.
He's not done.
Okay, so I'm not happy. I don't see any other way out of this. Time is our enemy here. We have got to get something built, and we've got to get it done. I'm terrified of what would happen if there's a natural disaster in any way that affects our water treatment plant. That cost, and I was asking a lot about this before, the cost of the risk associated with not rebuilding scares me to death. At the meeting, Dean yelled out to me, it's $100 million. Well, I don't know if it's that much, but it's a lot of money. And then, not a real strong disaster plan, in my opinion, from what I heard. So I'm just saying, go forward with it.
Okay. And the next would be,
Sure.
I'll do, you asked
So
a
you
question
going
relative to that.
P3?
Clarification on
A
that.
clarification on that.
See, Jim, the Ernst and Young, it was my impression,
You're not, wait, you're not listening.
Sorry?
the Ernst and Young,
Yes.
it was my impression that that margin of error was something that Ernst and Young brought forward. And when they showed the, you're correct, that the IDE had done a much greater level of design effort. But I thought it was Ernst and Young that went from that to project or not project a possible level of error. But, so I'm just questioning whether they really, they made that proposal, which I agree with in the way you said it, but some of the analysis was done with Ernst and Young assessment of how exact the proposals were.
Okay, we ready to move on to,
So this was the
Yeah.
sheet that I was
Yes.
referring to. It talks about financial terms and certainty and the AP comparison. And then the next one after that, financial terms and certainty, the summary cost of certainty. And if I could find the verbiage here. I'll just quickly. Proposals have undertaken different levels of design development, cost estimation to arrive at their CapEx prices and have differential margins of error attached. So if you hadn't designed it a lot, you're gonna throw greater margin of error in,
Yeah.
right? These margin of errors provide an indication, although not certainty, of how much price may alter during an interim agreement negotiation period. Qualia, the FLW group, and NextSpring all had margins of error built in. IDE was guaranteed.
Okay.
I mean, the facts are correct, the facts are there. But then they came back 6 months later or a year later and says, sorry, war in Ukraine, inflation, we can't do it for that. And the commission accepted that.
Right. So it's, again, water through the treatment plant.
Gerald?
Round up the usual suspects. It's been stated a couple times around the table, time, money, and performance. We're way past the point of being able to revisit a decision about whether or not it should be a P3. Personally, I've not had the fear of a P3 that seemed to be, that inculcated the conversation during the period of time that we've been discussing it. So for me, P3 is fine.
Fine.
Don't have the resources at the city level. You'd have to hire a bunch of people because the success of any project, whether it's a P3 or one that you do internally, is dependent on the specs that you write, the agreements that you have with who's doing the work, because somebody's gotta do the work. You're not. The technology is deployed to actually do the job that the plant's been challenged to provide in terms of water. I think we covered that in your letter here. Don't lose a grip on this.
Okay, well, let's talk.
So the question for me is, and I've been here with many capital programs in my life. $666 million, really? Are you kidding me? Until you're finished paying, right?
30 years later,
Yeah, 30 years later, $1.4 billion.
he's a businessman, he's not afraid of these numbers.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I'm saying, you're
I-
in business, you're not
it's-
afraid of numbers.
You have to go ask for that kind of money. You better get the Mercedes class water treatment plant.
That's right.
There shouldn't be anything. With respect to Five Ash, I'm going on Wednesday. But again, we're past the point of making a decision about that anyway.
Yes.
It's landlocked, it's old. I I did consult with a bunch of people that are different from all the ones that were around this table, whose livelihood depends on their ability to purify water. They gave me some reason to be hopeful. But for me, it comes down to $666 million, period, in this thing.
All right, that leaves,
That's
Me.
you.
okay.
Oh, and one other.
Oh, yes, please.
Excuse me, one other,
Delay
because,
me.
and I looked at the point. The other thing I researched, because we've been talking about it, is the chloramine question. Never been answered, been discussed, but never been answered. What are you gonna use, folks? Because there are places in the world that won't let that shit go in pipes.
And for those people that don't know what chloramine is, it's chlorine plus ammonia. And it has chloramine, that it produces chloramine, and then there's other in the equation that spin off. But, and what I've been, as I'm not a chemist or anything, but some people think I am. But what it, way I understand it, the way it's published, is that when you get ammonia with the disinfectant chlorine, it will dilute it to some degree, but it extends the disinfection life throughout the pipe. And so if you put it up higher, it's, it has it's, the ammonia or chloramine will last longer through the pipe with the chlorine as the disinfectant. How good that is, I really don't know. I mean, I haven't, but that's what they say.
Can I ask you a question? Didn't our consultant say that there is a DEP requirement for a certain level of chlorine in the water and
Yes.
as a disinfectant?
Yes.
So it's not a question of we can't have chlorine. We will have chlorine. The only question is
The ammonia.
the ammonia. And is the ammonia, as I understand it, thank you very much, Mr. Corbett, that if you mix it really thoroughly, you only get monochloramines, which not that bad. But if you don't mix it very thoroughly, you could have bi or tri.
No, that's not true. It changes as it goes through the water distribution system, depending on pH, turbidity, and heat. It's constantly changing from mono to bi to tri.
Thank you,
Those are poisons.
thank you
You're
very much.
welcome.
Thank you for the correction.
But
Okay.
that is why, as part of the OCCT work and the permitting for the plant, we have to take that in consideration to determine exactly what type of chemicals get introduced in the water and how it will change or degrade going through the pipe so that it meets the right standards at the tap.
Oh, I see.
So that's part of the permit requirements is to evaluate that.
Okay.
And I
Well,
think
yeah,
that's why he said we could also, as they're doing the plant, go from where you're doing the chloramine to free chlorine. Yeah, he was talking about different ways that we could possibly meet the disinfection requirements that are established by DEP.
Okay, well, we got a couple more questions on this issue, yes.
And I'm not a chemist either, I'll say that.
No, we're all gonna have PhDs in chloramine by the time we finish. Shane?
Mr. Bocock mentioned something real briefly in his presentation about booster stations and potentially chlorinating there as well to extend the disinfectant residual. Has the city looked at doing that in the future at all to try to?
I'm not aware of any studies looking at that.
But
Okay, but it's a
it's not, it's a
potential
good idea,
possibility.
it's a very good idea, and maybe we should be thinking about that.
The other one, you guys would know, the conversation about the dead ends.
Okay, so the dead ends has to do where you have water goes down a pipe that
It
basically
stops.
it stops. The only place it goes out is through somebody's faucet or flushing the toilet. And so when we have pipe breaks or leaks that cause us to drop below 20 PSI, that's when they put the precautionary boil water notices in place, and we have a really hard time getting clean readings saying that there's no bacteria or anything in the water to do it. So the fix to that is basically taking all those dead ends and creating loop systems so the
Yes.
water is constantly flowing. And that's part of the long-term plan for addressing the water pipes is to get rid of the dead ends.
Yeah, and those cul-de-sacs,
That would help too, but yeah, so there's a couple of things that we could be exploring.
Are all of these efforts convergent on when the new plant comes online?
No, those efforts are already part of
They're
the
underway, but
long-term
will
plan, yes. It's a matter of
Time.
funding and time and
We're coming
priorities.
here, we're coming here, let's what, Ralph and then Peter.
Yeah, the city has already indicated that they're doing away with the with the dead ends by creating a loop somehow. So that the water velocity flows through and it doesn't stagnate, basically. And if you got an older pipe with rust, there's more concentration of rust that you see, and the people that, well, the ladies that do the laundry complain about their white sheets coming out a different color.
Why are the ladies doing the laundry?
Well, I
Really, Ralph, 2023, Ralph.
The record show that Ralph is a chauvinist.
No, no,
No, just old.
it's an older generation, and it was a kinder, gentler time
So I
then
have a
too. Yes,
question
go
on the
right
same
ahead, Peter.
thing. So in the agreement, it talks about the preparing an optimal corrosion control plan.
Right.
So that is done when the newly treated water goes through the old pipes. Then how it comes out is a little open to question, right? So it has to be looked at and adjusted treatment adjusted slightly according to an optimal corrosion control plan, correct?
Yes.
And then, so who is responsible for constantly providing and tweaking that plan?
Okay, so it is, because it's part of a permit requirement, the project company will be the one that will commission for the study to be done. However, the city has the right to review and approve who the consultant will be that will do the work, because it fits within the permit. As the study is completed, and it will make recommendations on how to modify the plant design to allow for the chemical plant. Our people will be involved with that decision, and then as we're actually doing it on a day-to-day basis, the city will be the ones monitoring it and making adjustments in how much is being introduced every day, so that, based on our water testing protocols.
And don't we somewhat have an example of this already with Peel Dixie, which is basically the same treatment process? Again, it would have been run initially through old pipes. And are you able to say anything? It's before your time at Peel Dixie was done, but you know what the outcome is as far as the concern about the chloramines, etc., related to Peel Dixie?
Right. It's exactly the same as what's happening now in Peel Dixie, as far as how we treat the water and introduce chemicals to meet the DEP requirements. So the exact same process that happens at Peel Dixie is what will happen at the Prospect Lake.
And there have not been major problems and issues related to Peel Dixie and what comes out of the taps in the area that Peel Dixie serves. Is that a correct statement?
Nothing that I have ever been aware of.
Okay,
Okay,
all right, yep, one more.
I know you wanna go and really get us confused, but, when we talk about, the responsibility for making sure that we got good water, that's could be assured by the operator or by the city.
Well, it is both. Okay, now, the project company has a responsibility to deliver water that meets certain standards and requirements. The city has responsibility to make sure that what they are producing is meeting those standards. So we will have employees who will be working directly at the plant operators who will be doing that. We will also have employees who are not working with them directly, but working at our lab, who are doing water testing and working together to verify that it's meeting the water quality standards that you find in the agreement.
So if the system is not meeting the expectation on quality, then that'll be a cost to the operator and not the city, right?
That is correct, because we have availability payments that we're making, and in the agreement, if they do not meet the water quality standards, it actually, there are deductions that they will have to forfeit in what they're getting for money. And then also, if they have any egregious violations on it, it could result in up to termination of the agreement with them.
I'm glad that you mentioned that because I put that down and I wasn't sure. So it's very good. I mean, egregious failure to meet the water quality standards is a default event, potential default event.
Yes.
Good to know.
So what do you do
Okay,
after
so wait,
that?
but then you take it over and you run it yourself.
Right, we end up taking it over and we will have to sort out, but if they are putting people at risk because of something that they're doing is violating life, health, safety standards, and we say that it's just not working, we have the right to terminate the agreement and then take what action we feel is appropriate.
Okay,
Okay.
back to me.
Yes, exactly.
I do not believe that the commission expects us to say to them tomorrow, we think you should sign this agreement. I really don't think that they expect us to say that. And I don't think based upon what we're saying, what we're talking about here, I'm not sure that there's a consensus here for us to go up to them and say, yeah, go ahead and sign this. That's my feeling.
Madam Chair, I've been noting as we were going around the table and excluding you, we had 7 people have said P3 and only Ralph have said no.
I stand corrected.
Okay. And when I get yours, I'll mark you down.
Okay, well, let me put it a different way. I don't think we need to say that you should sign this document. I think what we need to say is, we told you something very important in 2019, that these were the conditions that I don't care how you do it, these were the conditions that you had to meet. And I think we can say with confidence, based upon our review of the document and the staff and the consultants and that they have met our concerns about the quality, the rates and the control, okay? And after Alan just gave me the additional information about if you don't meet the control, yes, I realized that there were penalties, monetary penalties along the way, but I did not know for sure that egregious failure to meet the quality is a potential default event. So that gives me even greater confidence that they have met the conditions that we established in 2019. So let me ask you this, would it be the better way to go, or a way to go, to simply restate what we told them
Absolutely.
in 2019
Yeah.
and say that based upon our looking at the documents and the appendices and the information we've gotten from the staffs and the consultants, that this particular deal, this particular P3 would meet those qualifications. Now, we might also want to say that from the perspective of, we wanted to point out a few other things, but these are things that are like business things,
But subsequent to this resolution,
yeah,
did we not vote against or recommend against a P3?
we absolutely
Yes, we
did.
did. Yes,
And
we
they
did.
did not take our advice. So we're not going there again, that's
Well,
where
except somebody could, when the commission meets with the public, et cetera, they could listen, for example, to what you just said, if we transmit that message and say, well, that's all well and good, but don't forget, whatever it was, 2 years later, 18 months later, they voted against.
Yeah, well, but the way I put it in this is a draft. We have to wordsmith this, because I've gotta say something, and I can only say it with your approval. So I put down a proposal here. Let me read you the proposal. It starts out that November 2019, we communicated to the city commission that if they were gonna go to a quote P3 route for the new water treatment plant, then 3 things should be considered, and the thing is attached, okay? And those are the things we've always talked about: control of the water, control of the quality, and control of the rates. I mentioned, and I thought this perhaps was gratuitous, but maybe it's not gratuitous, to remind them that in February of 2022, we communicated to the commission that we believed an RFP was a better way to go. I don't know if you wanna keep sticking that in their face or not, but this is a draft, okay? In February 2022, the commission, however, voted to go the P3 route and began negotiating the comprehensive agreement with the partner, right? Everything up to here is just the facts, ma'am, okay? In the next year, the ITFAC worked with the city staff to review the comprehensive agreement with the original 3 recommendations in mind. Okay? And the comprehensive agreement, which is the subject of tonight's meeting, we always gotta bring it back to what are you doing tonight? Subject of tonight's meeting. Control of the water remains with the city. The permit to draw the water, the associated wells and pumps are all in the control of the city. The city is responsible for providing the operator the amount of water we require at the quality currently specified. 2, the quality of the finished water is detailed in the appendices of the agreement. Testing of the finished product is supervised by the city, and any deviation is penalized in the agreement. Continued failure to meet quality standards is a default. I'll put it a potential default, as the way Alan phrased it, a potential default. Continued failure to meet the quality standards is a potential default.
Yeah, yes.
Okay. 3, the total cost of providing the finished water to the city is set out in the agreement and fixed for the 30-year period. In this way, the city is in control of the impact the new water treatment plant will have on the rates. There may be other factors that impact the water rates, but the impact of the new water treatment plant is fixed and accounted for in the rate structure.
Well,
So this
So-
is just put it on the table
Yeah,
for
off the-
discussion. Yes.
Yeah, off the top of my head, apologise for the language, I think could be a cop-out, the way it's put here.
Okay.
Which one?
The whole thing, in the sense that there is no clear, I'm just kind of putting this on the table, I'm thinking it through. There is no clear recommendation from us. And you also open the lid on the RFP, which leads the commission down the path of, why wasn't the RFP progressed more, et cetera, but as people have said, we are where we are. So, given our remit, do you think, do people think that failing to pass a clear resolution on admittedly a very, very difficult subject, like myself said, I don't regard either of them as the wrong alternative. You don't think that failing to provide clear recommendation is not meeting our remit, Commission?
Well, that's a very good question that I'm asking everybody this is why this is a draft, you know? What do you think, Roosevelt?
I like your layout here, and you're restating what we said way back, and I think that if we left it like this, if you want to have a definite recommendation from us, and you can always get those same thing at the, we voted yesterday at the committee and it was not unanimous, but 8-1, that we go with the P3.
So-
Would that be clear enough?
Well, let me go around the table now. You remind me that there was 7 people who were.
Yeah.
Okay, so that would argue in Peter's favor, that there should be a definitive statement at the end here, like
Well, that's-
for these reasons.
That's what I gave
Okay,
you.
that's what you think, so I'm asking the group 2 questions. Should we take out the language about in 2022, we recommended an RFP, because that's like, it's water under the bridge. So if we just took that out, and everything we have said so far in this document is the God's honest truth. And the bottom line is, given all of the above, 7 out of the 8 people voted to go with this RFP.
And which way you wanna
Would you
vote?
be comfortable? I'll go with it if that's what everybody says.
P3, then it's gonna
P3.
be 8 out of 9.
8 out of 9, okay. If everybody is comfortable with going that far, we don't have to go that far, but if the sentiment is it's necessary to go that far and we're comfortable with going that far, I'm with you all.
Two comments of what you
Yes.
just got finished saying. Don't put it at the end, whatever we recommend,
Put it in
be the
front.
first sentence,
Yes,
number one.
for the following reasons.
You wanna do like I did my presentation, I'm gonna vote for, but.
Okay,
Alan, are there any, in the comprehensive agreement, are there any items in the agreement that are left open or TBDs at this moment?
No.
Are there any impasses, non-agreed items? We're done.
we're done.
Can we have public comment
But just a
before you
minute, we're
guys
not
make the
finished.
decision?
No, we're gonna finish our meeting and then have public comment. Yeah, so, yes, James.
I think we should leave in the history, I think that, I think there's value in that.
Yeah.
About telling them that we weren't gonna go this route in the first place, okay? Everybody agree with that?
That's a fact.
It gives context, I think, with that backstory, you know, especially as somebody, cause look, we have, what, 3 new commissioners now?
Yes.
Right, so I think it gives some context to the story of where you guys started and how we ended up here.
Okay,
And those
good
three
enough.
commissioners in the same boat you in.
So then I would
Got
preface,
6 years.
then I would preface this statement with, we had a special meeting on such and such a date, and then we had our regularly scheduled meeting on such and such a date, and after discussion, yada, 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 we voted, whatever the vote is gonna be, to recommend that the commission approve this comprehensive agreement for the following reasons, and then give them the
Then give
history.
your-
So this statement, as you have written it, would stay intact.
Pretty much
what you said.
intact, yeah. But it would be prefaced by what I just
Yeah.
said.
Yes.
So,
Anybody wanna make a resolution to that effect?
well, I have a
Okay, you're not ready.
a somewhat detailed question.
Okay.
So, the way you see it, Alan, then, is the commission will be voting up or down the agreement exactly as written, correct? Currently,
Well, it's gonna be in substantially the form as.
substantially.
Because there's no disagreements on stuff. There's a lot of small cleanups that have to happen in here. You'll go through it, you'll find grammar errors and lots of,
Yeah.
but nothing that changes the
Okay,
terms.
so let me ask you then, how comfortable do you feel that the owner and initiator of this whole P3 is basically able to walk away after 2 years? Because I'm not very comfortable with that.
I wouldn't speculate. I think that based on what I know of them, at least at the one that they've been there for more than 6 years now. The one that they use, but I think that it's a business that is in it to make money, and a lot of the money is tied up in that long-term 30-year period.
Now, I'm not saying they should be on the hook for 30 years, but you know, when you get a new plant, you always have bedding in issues and so on and so forth. And I don't think 2 years is enough to resolve it. And it's all very well saying, well, you still leave the operator there, and they've got to sort this out. But the main person that was responsible to do the design but had overall responsibility, you know, they're gone. And I feel they should stick around and see the results or otherwise of their efforts. But for at least something like 5 years, they shouldn't be allowed to go.
The contractor who's building it is Kiewit, and there is warranties that are included in here for the performance of the work that they are doing. Now, as far as the operations on it, I think within 2 years you will know if there are any issues. You will have flushed them out within 2 years, but I would like to see them here for the whole
The
30-year period.
contractor his contract is with the owner. So if the
Yes.
city is not happy about some aspect of the contractor's performance, you're really relying on the owner to enforce their contract with their contractor.
However,
And they
we
could
do
be
get-
gone. It could be somebody in their place, but they won't have the same interest in making the contractor perform. So I've said enough on this, but
Yeah. I'm, in my heart, I'm with you, but as I thought about it more, I thought about it and I said, well, listen, this is a business decision, okay? Not my decision, and I have made my commissioner very clear that, you know, I would like to see a longer period. And if you all feel the same way, you have a commissioner, you should get to your
I already
commissioner.
told mine.
and say, you know, one of the conditions we put on this comprehensive agreement tonight is that the, you know, equity partner has to stay for 5 years or something, whatever they decide. Whether they, you know, we've been to this rodeo before, and when they get down to the nitty-gritty and they're all tired and comes time for a vote, sometimes they don't put those things in, but again, that's a decision for them to make. If they're signing a contract, you know, that doesn't tie these guys up for a longer period of time, that's really not our bailiwick. I would have loved to have made a big deal out of it. I did make a big deal out of it the last time because they asked me, not because I was told. So we put it on the table
We did.
for the record. Okay, any other questions before we put, I asked somebody for a motion. Is it a motion or a resolution?
Well, do you wanna hear from the public?
No, I do not want to hear from the public until we have finished with our business.
I've got a point to make on an error I see on the back here.
Yes, what, an error?
This is obviously wrong for me, it's a minor thing.
Oh my God, from 2019, give me a break.
I had to find that. So.
Okay,
So we're about to consider probably a vote, making a recommendation.
correct,
Now, procedurally,
yes.
we're doing that before we've heard public input.
We have heard public input for 6 years. We have heard public input for 6 years. It's the same input. Procedurally, okay, and we will hear it again and I will listen to it again, and I'm sympathetic to some of it. But procedurally, we have a meeting, we have an agenda. We're gonna get to the end of our meeting. Our agenda says at the end of the meeting, we take public comment. It doesn't say in the middle of our meeting, we take public comment. Am I right? You're my parliamentarian?
What's the point?
Yeah, the only thing about the way you stated that is, then it does, if we'll finish our business, it doesn't matter what the public says. I know I have this problem from time when I'm down here at the commissioner meeting and they do all that discussion and then they vote, then they wanna open the damn floor. For what?
Mhm.
You already
It's already
voted.
done.
So, my suggestion, and it's only my feelings, that let's hear from the public, and then when they finish, we vote.
Is that the consensus of the group?
I'm okay with that.
Okay, then we will, at this point, we will take input from the public. How many speakers do we have?
2.
Please come up to the podium.
Are we timing speakers?
They have 3 minutes.
Yes.
Okay, this is not the project that we need. The P3 will still use 5-ashes pumps, generators, computers, workspace, water storage tanks, etc. You're not building a new plant. You're just adding water filtration system 4 miles away, and it is not worth $485 million. It will fit at 5-ash, saving $185 million in connecting water pipes. I spoke with the utilities director in Waxahachie, Texas for an hour today. They don't have much to do over there. They built a nanofiltration system in 2009, which has a building that is designed to be able to put out 50 million gallons of water per day, nanofiltration, and it does other things too in the building, on 1 acre. He said if it was just for nanofiltration, which is all we need, it could fit on less than a half an acre. When Omar tells you that nanofiltration won't fit at 5-ash, then this city staff member is lying to you. When Bill Becker says that chloramine is better at dealing with biofilm, then this outside consultant is lying to you. Chloramine is what causes biofilm. Nano will fit. A half an acre, and there's over an acre where the North Tower storage tank was removed. There's an additional 7 acres of parking lot that can easily be used for nanofiltration. He's been pushing for ozone for this guy in Texas for over a decade. He prefers ozone for many reasons. By the way, their nanofiltration system wastes 2% of source water because it's built that way. They somehow recycle the wastewater. We could do the same thing. and ozone can be leased if necessary. The P3 agreement states that water quality must meet the contract standard, not EPA standards, which can change, so the city must accept whatever price the for-profit company will charge to put out legal water. We are currently using 41 million gallons of treated water for both 5-ash and Peel Dixie, if you add nanofiltration to 5-ash, and just the 20,000 new condos currently in the pipeline for downtown Fort Lauderdale alone. That'll bring us to needing 56 million gallons per day of source water, and our permit will only allow for 53 by the time the P3 plant is built. If we're going for nanofiltration, then we should get permitting for additional water before building the plant. It will take much less time to add ozone generation system, change the filtration media, which is just granular stuff, to carbon, and a lime injection system, all costing $60 million, plus $12.7 million per year in upkeep for all three of those units per the Reese 2021 pilot study. So the answer to the question of P3 or RFP is no to both. The 2017 Reese
Oh, was
report
that it?
said the city goal was water with 8 or less color units.
Could you wrap it up, please?
I am. The
Good.
Reese pilot study with ozone and carbon produced water with 6 color units. Practically perfectly clear. So Hazen now says the city goal has changed and it's less than 5 color units, so they can say ozone and carbon does not meet the city goals. It's a $1 billion heist which will kill people since ammonia will still be added to drinking water, which greatly weakens the disinfecting power of chlorine, and it creates biofilm for bacteria such as Legionella to thrive in. All we need to do is filter out more dirt from our drinking water. $1.4 billion is a ripoff.
Thank you.
Any questions at all? Yes,
No.
sir.
I'm not gonna, I don't have a question,
Okay.
but I don't think anything that you said is gonna change the way and what we have to do, because everything, you need to be talking to the commission.
I am, through you.
Before, no. Because they have pretty much made these decisions. What we are doing is just trying to say yay or nay on the contract. The contract is pretty much set. Am I right? And what you're asking for is a change of contract. We can't do that.
But then that's why you should say nay, because it's built on false premises. It's saying that you cannot build nanofiltration at 5-ash when clearly you can. On 1 acre, 7 acres if you need it.
That was just my recommendation.
Right, I'm not
Thank you.
lying to you guys.
Next person, Victoria?
Okay. Hi, everyone.
Hello.
My name is Victoria Olson. You're probably wondering why I come to these meetings. I actually live in Oakland Park. We've had water issues, just like Wilton Manors. I've been asked by a couple of the commissioners to come to the meetings to be their eyes and ears because we receive the water. I'm also a delegate with the AFL-CIO, and I'm having a meeting with Andy Mattis, with a gentleman who's helping negotiate, and he also asked me for eyes and ears. Basically, I think that we need to replace the plant, bottom line. My fear is that in 10 years, something catastrophic happens and that plant dies. Where are we gonna be? I just think that it has to be replaced. On the other hand, the gentleman that we heard from the last meeting that did the PowerPoint presentation, I did this for Marilyn because she wanted to know about this gentleman. He is really an expert in his field. He's worked in about 5 or 6 different states, hired by elected officials to help do consultation on their water plants in their issues. Not so much as building the plant, but if there's an issue of why the water quality is not being the way they want it to be, that he comes in for a consult. So that's all I have to say, and plus his recommendation, Bocart, about the pipes is really, really important, I feel. And there are 6 municipalities who are going to be receiving this water. I am going to be reaching out to Oakland Park, and this is what the mayor should be doing as well, because he didn't reach out to the commissioners that he was going to do a P3, which is not really a P3 anymore because you beat him down. That every municipality would be responsible for replacing their own iron pipes. Because if we're going to get this water from a new plant and the pipes are bad in these municipalities, then we're gonna be complaining again, why isn't our water good? If he reaches out and makes it a joint thing with all the commissioners, that they have to put in some budget to help do the replacement, I'm not saying that they would do, however the mayor wants to work it out. It would be a brilliant idea, it would save costs, and it will give each municipality some teeth in the game of why their water is what it is, and if they don't replace the pipes, then this is what they're gonna get.
Thank you very much, Victoria, and I appreciate
welcome.
very much your doing that research for me.
Do you want another copy, cause I emailed you?
No, I have it, thank you very
Okay.
much. Okay, I think she brings up a very good point. We sell our water to these municipalities, and we're gonna now hopefully be selling them crystal clear water. But selling them crystal clear water, if they don't fix their pipes, they're never gonna see the benefits of crystal clear water. Just like us, if we don't continuously upgrade all of our older pipes, we won't see the benefits. And that was, I thought, the most important part of the presentation that we heard at our last meeting. So, okay, thank you very much for your input, ladies and gentlemen. Public part of the meeting is over. Shall we get on with our business? Thank you. Do you wanna make a motion? Are we ready? I don't wanna push anybody, we got time. Are we ready to make a motion? Okay, who wants to do it? I can't do it, I'm the chair, I can't do it.
But real small committee, you could, but,
You want me
Shall I-
to take a
shall-
stab at it?
yeah, cause I had to decide what it is we wanna put in there.
Let's start out with something to the effect that we've had our meetings and we have voted to, and we leave the number blank. We have voted to recommend that you sign this comprehensive agreement for the following reasons. That's what we were talking about. Unless you wanna word it differently.
So, I move, that the ITF having, that the ITF,
It's regularly scheduled.
is in favor of proceeding with the currently proposed contract for the P3 agreement for a new water plant at the
Prospect Lake.
Prospect Wellfield. In making this resolution, the ITF took account of the following reasons.
That's it, okay. Was that loud enough for you over there?
If I could just, in putting it together, we have never used the term contract, we use the term comprehensive agreement. So
Okay.
I would just
Okay.
recommend making that change.
Alright, we'll go with that.
Were you able to get any of that?
I wanna read what I.
So I was
The
struggling
board
with
is
it,
in favor of proceeding with the current comprehensive agreement, correct?
yes.
For the P3 for the new water plant at
Prospect Lake.
Prospect Wellfield,
Is it, do we refer to it as the Prospect Lake Wellfield or just Prospect Lake?
It's referred to as the Prospect Lake Wellfields, it's also referred to as the Prospect Lake Site. So I think probably the site is the more
At the
accurate.
Prospect Lake site.
Second.
For the
For
following
the
reasons, second.
following,
We're making this resolution, in making this resolution, the ITFC took into account the following reasons, followed by
Okay.
your memo.
Okay?
Okay.
That's it. Short and sweet. Do I have a second?
Yes, I did, a second.
Okay. Shall we do a voice vote or let's go around?
discussion, roll call.
You want discussion?
Sorry.
Hearing no discussion, shall we move on to an individual vote? Please call the roll.
Mr. Angeli,
Yes.
Mr. Grabsky,
Yes.
Mr. LeBrey,
Yes.
Mr. Marshall,
Yes.
Mr. Partington,
Yes, subject to clarification that we are attaching the chair's statement
Yes.
exactly as written.
Exactly as written. We're not fooling with it.
Mr. Walters,
Yes.
Mr. Zilman,
I'd like to hear what we're voting again specifically on.
Let's repeat the motion.
the board is in favor of proceeding with the current comprehensive agreement for the P3 for the new water treatment plant at the Prospect Lake site. In making this resolution, the ITFC took into account the following reasons, followed by your memo.
Followed by that memo.
Yes,
That memo.
I've already voted no on
So you
before.
say gonna no.
I'm just gonna
That's
say
a no.
Okay. Mr. Lamberts
Yes.
and Chairman Munger,
Yes.
so passed 8-1.
There you go.
Just like last time, there's always gotta be one that says no.
You can take my
Keep
place.
You two can battle it out.
Well,
But you- by the way, you don't get to go and say it, because only one person can go.
I remember that. Okay, although I would encourage you, if you're around tomorrow night, to come and stand there in the row, you know. It always looks good when we're all in the row.
And it will look good.
Yeah, it would look
In
good.
fact, and if, when you get up to speak it, it wouldn't even hurt if you all going to stand behind you.
That would be nice. I never wanna stand there by myself.
No, I know.
All right, gentlemen, we're very close to 4:00. I think this was a heavy lift today. I don't think any more of the I would assume, or I would ask you all, should we defer the rest of the agenda since most of it is monitoring
I have
and
a
stuff?
time-sensitive question,
Oh, a time-sensitive question, yes, indeed.
hopefully.
So should we do that under
Maybe,
general wait a second, let's do this correctly, all right? Item number 3 was the Public Works update. I am recommending,
Can I make one quick
oh,
comment?
well then let's do the agenda.
Okay, I just wanna
Public
let you know
Works
that we just received notification that the state of Florida just awarded us $23 million in grant funds, actually $23,978,740 for the Progresso neighborhood and Dorsey Riverbend stormwater projects.
Yay!
Finally.
I also noticed that in the commission's priorities, going up to Tallahassee, again Tuesday night, we're asking for, I think it was $1.5 million for the wasn't the water treatment plant, but it was for more of the
Oh, the I&I.
the I&I,
Yes.
the I&I. We're asking for $1.5 million from the state to accelerate I&I. We'd be happy with that.
That won't go too far, but every bit
I know, but any bit helps.
Every bit.
Right. Okay, that takes care of item number 3. Item number 4, general discussion, you had an issue, Peter.
So yesterday, or last 2 days anyway, we apparently had in the area 4.5 inches of rain. So maybe in the absence of Dr. Gassman, who was here earlier, next meeting, we can get a report as to whether Lomar was able to cope with that, with the injection wells, etc.
We had no problems with dealing with it yesterday. We did have significant flooding in probably 6 to 8 areas of the city for short periods of time. Most of them drained pretty quickly and didn't require. The only one that we had to respond with vehicles was on A1A at the intersection with 9th, where there was something clogged in the FDOT systems, And we ended up having to truck water up because it was too deep for vehicles to pass.
But you didn't have any events that we're gonna require a
There's no
report to
overflow.
DEP or anything
No,
like
no,
that?
there was nothing that happened.
So you've answered that, thank you.
Okay, Ralph has a question, and I have one too.
Alan, I'm trying to look and determine, and I couldn't see, looking at the Peel Dixie plant, I could only find one deep injection well. I know security probably has the other one covered, but normally they have, as you know, a backup in case the current one fails. You have another alternative, so you don't have to shut down the plant. Is there one or two deep injection wells?
I don't know, I'd have to find out from the plant folks.
Okay, I just thought if we didn't, maybe the sewer mains are large enough to.
Well, also remember with that one, we can take it offline for short periods of time, cause it is a small amount of quantity, we just pick up.
By 5-ash.
Right. But I can find out the answer.
Okay, thank you.
Alan, also tomorrow night on the agenda for the commission, they're having for discussion whether or not we should go and ask the state to increase our permit at Lohmeyer from the current, I believe the county allows us to process up to 43 MGDs, and the state allows us to process up to 50, and they've been talking about raising that limit. And we have not had any discussion about that. That came as quite as a shock to me.
We've employed one of our consulting services companies, CDM, to work with us in conversations with the county. So far, what we've had is preliminary conversations with the county. And it's actually 48 MGD with the county, and 56.6 with the state.
And they're based on different ways they calculate what those average are. One's on a 3-month average, the other's on a 12-month average.
And so our conversations with them is showing them our actual physical capacity of the plant itself and how it exceeds the actual permit capacity plus factors of safety. Among other things, the 104 million in our current capital plan for I&I over the next 5 years, as well as various other efforts that we're putting in order to improve our efficiency in operations, as well as reduce the amount of times that we have to actually use the emergency outflow of the treated effluent. So with those conversations, we're hoping that they'll allow us to use a smaller factor of safety, which is basically the number that gets us at the 48 million gallons as opposed to 49 or 50 or whatever. So we're hoping that they'll let us use a smaller factor of safety for calculations, which will give us additional capacity from a permit perspective.
Okay, Peter.
But is that actually on the agenda tonight?
I did
This
not
came
see
up
anything on the agenda.
This came up at the, or it was an
At the
item
conference.
on
It
the
was a
conference
conference
agenda.
meeting that we had earlier, it's
And
not on the agenda.
You
for
had
tonight.
some actions that you were going to do, that you reported. But there was no discussion about, at this point, raising that 48 MGD. The city is bumping right up against that number now with the developments. They're hard up against the 48 MGD with current and proposed developments. So afterwards, Dr. Gassman told me in all likelihood, the city would be asking for what she called administrative relief from the county, which is effectively raising that 48 MGD. But tonight, that is not an action item, is that correct?
It is not an action tonight, but what is on the agenda is to award contracts for doing the I&I, the lining of the pipes, which will help to reduce the flows going into the plant.
Oh,
And
yes, that's
so
all.
it's
So we're all
a,
in favor of
That's
that.
all,
Right.
that's all
Okay.
good.
so the
So my
contract has
bad, I
actually got
was-
almost $49 million in capacity over the next 4 years.
Okay, but back to the subject matter. I thought it was on tonight, but it was just a discussion. We know that the permit capacity that we're bumping up against, okay, is the control on development in the city.
Mhm.
You lift that permit, you lift that up, now we got more development that we can approve. And so the question that I've been asked by commissioners and just general people is, why would you do that? You have a poop control on development. Why would you move the line up because we're being just inundated with development I'm not advocating, I'm just simply saying that we spent a great deal of time going over the question of a moratorium, and we recommended to the commission that we did not need a moratorium at this time, even though we were like bumping,
Yeah.
because I brings it down, up and down, up and down. You move that up, you just can keep going up. So I think we need to talk about that in the context of this moratorium discussion that we had.
What I would say is, sort of answering for staff, is that staff told the commission that the plant, and, you know, I'm not disbelieving staff, but the plant can probably handle, you know, significantly more, put it like that. I think they threw a number out, but it was a lot more. So, it is, what staff are saying is it's an arbitrary limit.
It may in fact be an arbitrary limit. I don't know why the county picked that number. Other than that, now you're telling me there's a margin of error and there's probably reasons. I'm sure the county will tell you there's lots of good reasons why they picked that number.
I can't speak to, so that it's a reference off of the DEP's number, first of all, it's just calculations with things, safety factor in there, but where did the 56 come from DEP? I can't answer that, that's many,
So it's a
Several
question,
decades
we
ago.
need to talk about it is what we need to do. At our next meeting, I think we'll put it on the agenda for the next meeting. Because they're not gonna take an action like in the next month. They're still talking about it and thinking about it, so it's an appropriate time for us to put it on the agenda. Okay? Anything else, gentlemen? Appreciate you all. Thank you very much.
It'll be Wednesday until we get to that, right?
Book is getting bigger.
Yeah, you reporter? Welcome aboard,
He did his thing and he's gone. He's on Twitter right now.
Oh, okay, I see.
He is probably dissing us all on Twitter right now.